All right. Ian, thank you for the slides about the residue and stuff like that. That's perfect. Checks in the mail. Um, so, drought is obviously normal, and I'm gonna go to the next one. I like I like to say, yeah, if you're on 15-inch average, but that's plus or minus 15. Some years it's 30, some years it's dang near zero. So yeah, it's something that when it's, happening right now, it's always front of mind, but we should be thinking about this in good years as well. And so that's kind of where this is going to be tailored to. In the interest of time, I don't think you guys need any history on NRCS and all that. Just know we were the Soil Conservation Service. In 1994, we transitioned to the Natural Resources Conservation Service to kind of encompass all of the things that are tied together. And we're not just looking at soil or erosion like we did back in the day, but we've realized, and we with that name change have made it clear that we're trying to figure out how these things are all interconnected. And so that's what this is about today. So, how do we define soil health as an agency? There are 100 different definitions or more that on soil health, but simply we like to define it as the continued capacity of the soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. Again, all about that interconnectedness. One of our soil scientists, I think Ray was a soil scientist, I'm not sure now, kind of trademarked the saying, these fields are naked, hungry, thirsty, and running a fever. And another one of my favorite claims that kind of ties into Ian's is, how much rain did you get? If two farmers are talking, well, I got half an inch. Well, the other guy says I got all of it because he didn't have any runoff. He got that rain, that half-inch rainfall to infiltrate, and he got to capture all of it. So when we're talking about soil degradation, it's not a very happy talk. I apologize. But essentially, if we're increasing tillage, we're lowering residue and diversity, we go into reduced aggregate stability, which leads to reduced soil organic matter, which increases erosion, increases compaction, further decreases infiltration, further increases erosion. Then you have ponding, increases crusting and surface compaction. Then you have lower water storage. Then you have even more soil organic matter losses. You have nutrient and topsoil movement laterally, which is not what you want. Lower nutrient availability, increased disease, lower crop yields, increased hunger and malnutrition. The fall of Rome can be described kind of in this slide, amongst other factors. So water from precipitation is going to follow one of these pathways. On no cover crop with bare soils, you can have water that runs off. You have compacted soils, water that can evaporate. That leads to no photosynthesis or reduced photosynthesis. Therefore, water is wasted and water is leached down below the root zone if leaching occurs or if infiltration occurs at all. When you have an armored soil, you have improved infiltration, better aggregated soils, armor with dead or live residue. So that means that droplet of rain or irrigation is hitting a leaf or some sort of matter before it hits the soil, and it takes that energy out. You have decreased erosion from that water. Water erosion is not something we generally think about. When we're thinking erosion, we're usually thinking about wind. But when we have these hard, fast rain events that inevitably during a drought, it's still going to rain, but it's probably going to happen in short bursts of an inch or more. And so they're harder and faster and can lead to further damages, as opposed to a typical year where you might get a 1/10 of an inch this week and then a 1/10 of an inch tomorrow. And then, it happens nice and gradually and your plants can use it. So increased water transpiration through plants, increased soil water stored in that soil profile, and living plants can intercept water and nutrients. So how do we get there? One of the things that's been mentioned is increasing soil organic matter does boost water holding capacity. So in my last presentation, I kind of lied a little bit and I said a loam will hold 0.16 inches per inch or whatever it was. That's a good ballpark, but it highly, highly, highly depends on your soil organic matter. You can see from the graph here, even if we look at the bottom lines, what's the difference between these two? Sand and silt loam. Let's look at the silt loam. So at the bottom, we have 0.16 inches per inch. If we were to increase that from 1% soil organic to 4 or 5, somewhere in that, at the bottom end of that, we're gonna have, I can't tell where the bottom is. There we go, about 0.2. So we increased the bottom from 0.1 to about 0.2 by increasing our soil organic matter. And then at the top end, what is possible, because all these things are not static. You can't just give a number to a soil. So this describes the range. Obviously, that range on the higher soil organic carbon is going to be a lot bigger. But even the bottom, the minimum that you're seeing for your soil water holding capacity goes up. And then look at the top of that. I can't say I've ever seen a silt loam with almost half an inch per inch of water holding capacity. I'd love to see it. But I probably haven't seen too many silt loams with almost 5% organic matter either. So, context does matter. Here in the arid West, if we can go from 1% to 2%, it's a huge jump. We're not upstate New York where we can see some of these massive numbers. I don't know why I picked upstate New York, just did. So what can we do today? Take a soil test, figure out what is your starting organic matter. With those soil tests, we've talked a lot about place-based and where you're going to take that location from. I would say take it from a lot of locations. Generally, find the spots that are representative of your field and then aggregate those together and send it in once. There's no reason in this context to take 10 different samples across your field and pay for 10 different soil tests. Even CSU's recommendations, and I can send you in examples of how they recommend doing these, but they recommend taking samples from across the field, aggregating those, and sending them in. Figure out what your starting organic matter is, and then make it a goal to increase that number. This has 1%. I think that's huge. It makes the math easier. I like math, if you couldn't tell from my last one. And I'm really disappointed that this one doesn't have very much math. But if we can increase that 1%, that soil organic matter 1%, I'm going to skip down here. That 1% increase equates to over 21,000 gallons of water in increased plant available water in your root zone. That's huge. Going back up, it's going to take some time. We're not going to hit there. We're not going to get there this year. We may not get there next year. That's going to take about 8 tons of carbon per acre to get cycled back into that soil to increase that organic matter by 1%. So yeah, dryland farmers or in a reduced irrigation system, that might take 5 years. Irrigated farmers have a little bit more flexibility to play with. They can change their microclimate, and they might be able to get there a little bit faster. It's a lofty goal, but I think it's worth achieving. And then soil organic matter holds 10 times its weight in water. It's probably not exactly 10. So generally, what do we see on this soil? The soil surface is covered. We can see organisms, worms and bugs and all kinds of things. If you look real closely, you can see the holes that those bugs and organisms create. You can kind of extrapolate that there's increased vegetation and manure breakdown. Fine root hairs are found in abundance, so there's a lot more surface area on those fine root hairs that have contact with the soil that can pull water and nutrients out of the soil. Soil carbon is evident. I guess it's dark brown in color, so that's always a good thing. We'll compare that with the next slide. You'll see a difference. I guess we're assuming that this soil has vigorous, dense plant growth. Just take our word for it. Good signs of soil aggregation, and it's going to have a sweet, earthy smell. So if you're looking at one thing, take a sample, smell it. Does it smell like it's soil that is living, or does it not smell at all? That's generally the best indicator, real quick, of what does your soil health look like. It's hard to quantify. I can't compare what I smelled today with what I smelled last year, but it's a good yes or no. Am I on the right track? So this next soil, I'm not going to go through every single one of those again because they're basically just the inverse of what I just said, but clearly there are differences. That bare soil at the surface is going to be public enemy number one, and we'll talk about that a little bit later too. I've kind of run through this before, but as we increase biological activity, we increase organic matter turnover, we increase nutrient cycling, improve soil structure, and ultimately improved water availability. I have no idea what that visibility part means. Tried to figure that out. Sorry. We're going in spurts here as far as my understanding of what the slides are supposed to represent. I say there are 6 principles of soil health, but this slide has 4. disturbance, minimize disturbance, maximize cover, maximize diversity, maximize continuous living roots. The fifth one would be integrate animals whenever you can, though that fits into the diversity part of it. And then context, I said it already in my first presentation. That's always big. Sometimes you can or can't do certain things. Sometimes you have different tools available to you. Your context matters probably more than any of these other things. It's how to fit these other things within your abilities and what you can actually do. So we're going to use these principles to feed and fuel the soil biology, and we're going to protect the aggregates that do exist, increase moisture, and protect the organic matter. So I'm not going to get into this too much. We call this the soil food web. It's very simplified, but just like we have the food chain that we learned about in second grade, we have a food chain in the soil as well. The smaller organisms are going to get eaten by the larger organisms, and those nutrients are going to cycle, and happy things can happen. Okay, this is a lot of words, and I'm just going to simplify it by saying diversity. No matter what the context is, this one happens to be in Wyoming, but it's a diverse mix of, I think this is dry land, it looks like. Anything you can do within your context to increase those soil health principles, the better off you're going to be. There's a lot of examples in this presentation that are from around the country. And again, that's just to show that the context matters almost more than anything. Different conservation practices that can help conserve soil moisture. We do have cover crops on there. A lot of people will claim, and rightly so, that cover crops do use water. It does take evapotranspiration or the transpiration to grow a cover crop. But if we look at some of those trends that we saw in what happens in the soil, I believe, and I think a lot of others do too, that yes, those cover crops are going to use moisture, obviously, but in the long term, they can help conserve soil moisture is what we're concerned about. And not only, I don't like the word necessarily conserve soil moisture in that context when talking about cover crops, but increase available soil moisture in further years. So what can we do for drought planning? Again, it's really hard to do some of these things when we're staring in the face of the drought. But these are just things to keep kind of constantly remember. I think Jess can send out these slides, and there'll be a lot of links and stuff like that later on too that would be handy to have for different resources. But again, same things, minimize evapotranspiration for veggie crops by providing shade and limiting wind, manage irrigation for the minimum requirements, plant deeper rooted veggie crops versus shallow ones. That ties into what I was saying earlier, expand the amount of soil you have to pull from. If you're going to do like straw mulch or something like that, it's a common practice. Keep in mind adding too much carbon too quickly can actually do things to those microbes to limit that cycling process that happens naturally. So, be careful of doing too much too fast. Now, in a drought emergency situation, maybe that 2 inches of compost, that application is worth it to conserve the moisture that we have right now. But just know that adding that much carbon without the nitrogen to kind of balance that system could have impacts down the road of slowing down some of these biological processes. Water early in the morning or at night with timers if possible. The only other thing I'd add to that is, if you have sensitive crops, as far as fungal and diseases go, keep in mind you don't want that leaf to stay wet for hours and hours, because that'll make them more susceptible to certain diseases. Check your flow rates. Is it what you're expecting? Plant quicker maturing crops that over time, they'll be in the ground and growing for less time. So ultimately, hopefully they will require less water throughout that growing season. And then know the critical timing for your needs. Different crops are all obviously going to have different times that they absolutely need water and cannot be stressed. I like that bottom one, the sugar beets. I use that one a lot. It's the content of sugar is what sugar beet growers are getting paid on. And that's heavily influenced on timing of irrigation and nutrient applications. So it may not be as relevant here for sugar beets and sugar content specifically, but for the overall folks in the room, I think it's still relevant to think about what your crop is, again, your context is, and think about what are the critical timing needs of the water that you do have. Birthday cake principle. I was trying to figure this one out too. I'm sure there's something really smart there. I just don't know what it is. Yeah, it's frosting. Cover it or leave it out. I'm not sure what we. I'm sorry. Again, context matters. This is uh, uh, New York somewhere. Maybe that's where I said upstate New York earlier because this was on my mind. $125,000 an acre on subprime farmlands. I mean, that's obviously totally different context than we have, but they're using these soil health principles to make it work for them, given their context. We're going to have different numbers. We're going to have different inputs and outputs and different things we can control. But you know, the system that we're given is the system that we're given and that we're dealing with and that we're working with, not against. And so the principles all still apply. This is an important slide. I'm really glad to see this one. Soil temperature is huge. You know, we don't want to essentially pasteurize our soil. This has the rate of photosynthesis drops off sharply at soil temperatures above 82 degrees Fahrenheit. If you've ever used a soil temperature probe, or if you have like what are those guns called? Whatever.
Temperature gun.
Yeah, there's a better name for it that I can't remember, but that's okay. You know, thank you. Yes. Get one of those. They're cheap, and super handy. You can, you know, do it in the sunlight, do it in the shade, do it on covered soil, on bare soil. It's eye-opening. And to just see, you know, 3 feet apart, where the soil is covered versus not covered, the differences that you'll see. And we're essentially pasteurizing our soils, you know, anything above like 90 degrees. And those systems within the plant growth are going to slow down. So more context. I think the point of this is to, you know, we've seen a lot of people have successes with inserting full season cover crops into particularly dryland systems, which is going to be even harder than irrigated systems. And we've seen great successes in their metrics as well as in their profitability long term. There's a few other slides in here that I really wanted a chance to show. How am I doing on time?
Usually 5 minutes left.
Perfect. Again, links and resources. Very, very complicated graph of that soil food web and how it works into that soil ecosystem. It's not math, so I'm going to skip it. One of the, you know, if we could, again, going back to that, you know, I got half an inch, well, I got all of it kind of a thing. That field on the left is ponding, it's running off, it's causing erosion and crusting. Not to mention when you have ponded soils, you have nitrification and you're losing a lot of your soil nitrogen. You know, a lot of bad things happen. And it's kind of hard to see, but the little cartoon at the bottom showing kind of what happens here is it doesn't necessarily matter what your subsurface soil is. If you have crusting anywhere in that soil profile, it's going to perch that water table, and you won't have that infiltration. So maybe like in that example, it's at the very top, but maybe it's just a couple inches down from a plow pan or some type of restricted layer. Grazing during a wet period can cause serious compaction, things like that. But you know, this one on the right, if you have good infiltration throughout your soil profile, always the better. I don't know how many pistachio growers we have, but it still stands. Lots of colors. Not going to do that. So I also like this one. This was showing a farm in California. The big takeaway that I wanted to point out is the difference in nitrogen application versus their soil organic matter. So they went from 0.5 to 3 in 15 years. That's huge, but 15 years is long enough that I believe it. That's doable. I've seen others that are like, oh, 4% in 3 years. No, there's a problem with your soil sampling there. But you know, this is reasonable to expect, if not lofty for sure. But their nutrient application was able to be cut in half, which is massive, especially with the prices the way they are now. I think nitrogen's $700-800 a ton, and that's on the commercial side. That makes a huge difference to the pocketbook. I think we've talked about all that kind of stuff. Cover crops with surface residue remaining had higher soil water content than bare and fallow field conditions. Again, adding shade as much as possible, reducing evaporation as much as possible, and level out those temperature swings can do fantastic things. When in drought, time to reroute. So again, now's not the easiest time to be making these changes, but it is the time to be thinking about what you can do when conditions are a little bit more plentiful and makes it easier to work towards some of these goals. So when you're doing your drought planning, obviously a lot of this is going to be short term. What are we going to do? What are we going to change this year? But think about those long-term things as well. What can I do maybe towards the end of this year growing season? What can I do next year when we're in this massive El Nino that they're promising? To better cover myself and my operation for the next time we're in drought, because it's going to happen again. Done. So that was a lot of slides and a lot of words, and I know I glanced over a lot of them. If you want to have a conversation about any of this stuff, Alex is on here. She was nice to put me on here, but most of our team is sitting over on that other side of the room. We'd all love to talk to you about how we can kind of make some of these principles that are very broad and general, how we can make them specific to your operation.
Any questions?
Saw you smirking the entire time.
Yeah. But from the previous presentation, there was that talk about high residue and if there's this potential for greater infiltration, so that we saw a spike in moisture, but then there was also a drawdown of that moisture. Why do you think that is? I think there's some talk about some potential air being able to get more into the soil that might dry it out, but it also be potential of the fiber of the residue pulling, like wicking moisture out. And is there a way, so maybe you've dealt with this, and is there a way to get the benefits without the downsides?
So maybe I took something different from that slide. I think the way I read it was those downsides are short term and the benefits that you're seeing are longer term. So eventually, as that soil organic matter improves, as cover improves, as infiltration rates, whatever, you're going to see a positive trend along the way. And you might still have some dips from water use from cover crops or non-cash crops, let's say. But overall, that trend is hopefully going to be positive. So that's kind of what I took out of it. Explaining, those downsides to a T. I don't know if I can. I think there's so many factors there. It could have been the residue side of things. I didn't think about that because when we're taking the soil tests and testing these things, we're trying to get rid of as much plant matter as we can. Maybe that got rid of some of the soil content in that test. I'm not sure. Hopefully that soil carbon nutrient cycle is working and those plant residues aren't sticking around as whole residues for very long and they're getting broken down. So I hope that's not the case and that those residues aren't acting as a sponge that's not available. And I don't think that's the case.
Curious thing to study.
It would. Yeah, I have enough degrees. I only have one, and that's enough.
Helps get it in, but it also brings it right back up.
Yeah, potentially.
At least with that data that I have, the other side to it is that the infiltration rate was a lot deeper. So the one that didn't have high residue, the lower residue one didn't get down to 8 inches. It was only spiking. It was staying wetter, but it was still coming down. It just wasn't going down as fast. And I think your wicking thing is kind of what comes to mind if I had to take a guess. But then you're getting that past 8 inches now, but the other one wasn't getting past 8 inches. So you're getting that water deeper, and then you're also cycling air and water more in the upper layer, giving microbes and other things more of an opportunity, because it does come back up even to the non-residue once it gets those irrigation events. And then the water does get deeper as well.
It's all traveling through that.
Yeah, it's like loosening up that top zone, letting more air down to dry it out, but it's also allowing deeper penetration of the water. At least that's what I'm thinking. I'm not.
So maybe your volumetric soil water content is a little bit lower in the top zone on the residue one, but that's because more of it has gotten deeper and is available for that in that long-term storage later, I guess. I don't know. I would venture to guess or assume that the ones with residue are going to have more total water if you looked at the total top 2 feet. But that's an assumption that's not gonna be true every time. But yeah. Yes.
2 questions. When you talk about adding carbon and hay or wood chips, we have a plethora of wood chips at our farm.
Mhm.
That it puts the carbon and nitrogen ratio.
Yeah, we talked about this at your picnic table.
Yes, we did. Would you recommend, since it's a drought year, to cover that? I've got some bare soil that we planted barley, but I don't, can't fertilize it, so I mean, irrigate it, so I don't know that. Would you recommend adding nitrogen fertilizer to counteract the mulch?
Generally not. As I mentioned, fertilizer's very expensive. And if you're just applying it or mixing it in with like a mulch or something like that, based on the drying and wetting cycles, you're gonna lose a lot of that nitrogen to denitrification into the atmosphere anyway. So, the carbon nitrogen ratio, the sweet spot that we want to talk about being 25 to 40 or whatever your number is. When that ratio is correct in the material that you're adding, you're going to see that cycle and that breakdown. It's hard, not impossible, but it's hard to correct a bad carbon to nitrogen ratio. Now, if the alternative is bare soil that doesn't have any growth on it, I'd still rather see a 300 to 1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. Wood chips or straw being about 200 to 1. I'd rather see that than bare soil. But maybe the next amendment to that is something higher in nitrogen, like a manure or something like that, to more naturally and slowly bring that ratio back into ideal. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool.
Second question, we're trying to do regenerative agriculture and I got my garden plot ready and I put a silage tarp on it to kill the pests and grass that's there. But you're talking about heating things up and it pasteurizing the soil.
Yep.
Did I do the right thing?
It all depends on what your goals are and what your context is, right? If you want to kill the weeds or the grasses or whatever that's there that are undesirable at the time, I'm going to call them weeds since they're undesirable. And you want to do that in a way without chemicals, then that's a great solution. And a lot of people do it. But do keep in mind that surface soil temperature is going to be 100+ degrees. And it is what it is. Now, if you go 4 inches down, which isn't very deep, you're probably going to be closer to that 80 degrees again. So you still have biology in there, but you are probably losing a lot of the biology in that top inch, couple centimeters even. It's not uncorrectable, but it's something, you may not want to do all the time. Yeah. Sometimes it takes big movements.
So maybe take it off before it gets really hot.
I'd say it depends how well the kill is going,
Smooth
right?
growth.
So
If you want to kill smooth growth,
sometimes you got to
it
break
takes,
a few eggs.
usually to kill it with a completely black plastic cover. Take like probably 2 years. I mean, it's deep in the soil and it's almost like impossible. So keep it on for however long you can.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to
Keep it
move,
on.
take a step backwards to take 2 steps forward. And that just is what it is. That's just part of the context.
But maybe this year, since it might be hot, it might just be a year. Keep it on all season. Don't take it off at all. Michael had questions.
So to add to the wood chips and the straw top dressings on there, what about biochar?
I was waiting for somebody to ask about biochar. I don't know. I'm torn on biochar. If you can get it reasonably priced and it's part of a system, I think it can absolutely work. I think it can absolutely be a benefit. I don't know what it costs, so I don't know if it's economical or not.
I see a biochar facility down here.
Yeah.
In Bertha.
Yep.
And
Biochar now?
something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know enough about it, to be perfectly blunt. I think you're gonna see similar issues with things like wood chips, but they've been processed to where they have a higher porosity and they're gonna add
Right.
they're gonna act as a sponge right away.
It seems like that carbon process has been sped up.
Yeah, there's been some sort of I want to call it digestion. That's not the right word.
Right.
But yeah, it certainly has, and I think it'll break down faster than something like raw wood chips would, because ultimately that's what the source of biochar is.
Right.
but I'm certainly no expert.
I've done a bit about
Please.
biochar, and so it really depends. So biochar is just basically burnt wood chips in a way, like completely burnt. I mean, it is like charcoal form, right? And that means it has a lot of carbon, and carbon has ability to hold on to a lot of nutrients. So it has a lot of open and available chains. And so basically what biochar, it can hold on to moisture better, but I think what it's best for is if you mix biochar with manure and with compost, because then it holds on to those nutrients longer, and those nutrients will now move and leach down to the system. So most people, if they do a biochar application, they'll mix it with compost or green waste or manure, and that's the best way to really get the bang out of your buck for biochar. And you're gonna want more of like a fine textured biochar than like a coarse biochar, and that's gonna get the best like nutrient holding capacity. But with all of these things, water is important because you could just put on your manure, you could just put on your compost, but if you're not watering it, you're not getting those nutrients to leach down to the soil a little bit, get to those plant root depths, then nothing really is gonna happen. So people might just want to cover some bare soil right now with some manure, but that's just going to get really like dried out throughout the year, throughout this summer. What you want to do is make sure it's like being incorporated with water. And so wood chips might be better in bare spots than if you're doing like a manure.
I was gonna ask too, how far would you incorporate biochar? Like, where is its usability at? Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people use it as like a top dressing. So like a biochar manure mix, and some people will like till it in, but it's like really good just like in that first like organic matter layer. But
Can I add something
Yeah.
about biochar?
yeah,
I farmed with it for 5 years and we just always had it mixed in with the compost application. It was like a low till, so first few inches. And it was like 100% clay, like 0 perk soil. It was super difficult to grow veggies in, and the biochar mixed in with the compost. We were like, you could like stick your arm elbow deep into the clay, like what was solid clay in 3 years. So I think it really helps too, just like opening up clay and getting organic matter to like lay down.
yeah. I mean, it kind of depends on like your goals and like how much land you have and how much profitability you can get from that land. And if you have small, like what Alex was having in the slides, like a smaller piece of property, and you really want to get as much nutrients and as much soil organic matter on that maybe it's worth it to get the biochar. But if you have a large property, it might not be worth it. Any other questions?
I'm like hesitant to even ask this because it's kind of silly, but I have a shit ton of leaves on my property and I don't have large acreage. And I'm just like, my neighbors have them and all these cottonwoods and elms and all this leaf matter that like I think about for my little backyard garden here. But I'm like, why should I think about that? Would I put that in a manure spreader? Or like,
It's low cost.
Yeah, maybe not a manure spreader, but you could compost it. It's great material to compost. And you could like actively compost that in a pile, or leave it to degrade. The processes are going to be quite a bit different, but they're also going to have very different input requirements too. So that does matter.
yeah, I was thinking more like just take them and
Get rid of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe that's what.
Yeah, so I would, if you're wanting to get rid of them, maybe reach out to somebody local that does some composting, and they might be able to take them off your hands and be put to beneficial use, right? Yeah.
And like with like leaf matter and like food material and all of those things are a lot of carbon. And so if you're doing composting and all of those things, you want to, like what Gail was saying, with nitrogen, that carbon to nitrogen ratio is what's right. So if you were doing compost, you would just basically get those like food waste or manure or whatnot, and you can kind of like layer it or incorporate it all together, and then you're gonna get a really good mix.
And it'll take like a year for that to be ready, right?
Depends on like how hot.
Yeah, it depends. Let's say 4 to 18 months. That's a huge range, but I'm fairly confident with it, so I'm gonna say.
Water and heat.